Hey you guys, it's a wonderful, beautiful sunny morning, and there has been this one topic that I've been tippy-toeing around for ages, ever since I started my YouTube channel. And honestly, years ago, it was one of the biggest reasons why I even wanted to start a YouTube channel in the first place. I was gonna do like a video series on this one, or surrounding this one specific project that I was working on for a very long time. And yeah, man, I've made so many videos already about this, but I did not publish any of them. Like, I'm not even joking. I seem to be going through some sort of cycle where every couple of months I'll make a video, like a very long one, talking about this one project, and I'll just decide to sit on it, and for whatever reason, I never end up publishing it. And at this point, I have like 3 or 4 of those, or even 5 sitting around. So I decided to just rip off the band-aid and sit down and just tell it like a story time, without trying to make anything else out of it, without trying to like make it sound positive or spin it into some sort of, this is what I learned from blah blah blah. You know what I mean? Like, I did obviously learn a lot of things from this, as should most people from any negative experience that they go through, because that is the only good thing to come out of most negative experiences, is the things that you manage to take away from them, obviously. But sometimes it feels very forced to just want to talk about an experience, but constantly trying to bring the positives to light, if you know what I mean. Like, sometimes I just want to tell a story like it is, without having to spin it into a lesson right then and there. Like, I would love to tell you guys the stuff that I learned afterwards. Sure, why not? There's a ton of shit that I can talk about, but when it comes to the actual experience of working on this long-term project that I'm sure some of you who have been following me for any number of for any amount of time know what I'm talking about, probably. It's this long-term graphic novel project that I worked on for a few years, some years ago. So the reason why I don't want to just let it go and never talk about it and just pretend like it never happened is because I have mentioned it enough times that I feel like I do kind of want to clarify it in some ways. And I also know that since I spent so long working on it, and it was like one of the major projects that I ended up being a part of over the years in my career, it's bound to come up at some point here and there. And I think it would almost be cathartic for me to just get the story out of the way. And then, hopefully, as a result, I won't have to be all cryptic and pussyfooting around the subject when I talk about it in future videos, because it's kind of exhausting, and I do feel like I just want to get it off my chest. So the first thing I'm gonna do is give you guys a brief rundown of what I think went wrong in this project overall. And the number one thing is definitely terrible, terrible communication all around, like between every single party, and mostly on my side and the person that I was closely working with. The communication between us was not a problem at first at all, but it became a huge problem not that long into the project. And this problem was like this monster that kept growing and growing. And the rest of the problem with communication was obviously our lack of communication with the rest of the team. And, the team was somewhere in the ether, and there was basically no communication from them to us either. So, in a nutshell, there was just crappy communication all around. And then the next thing is lack of feedback. So there was basically no feedback of any use whatsoever from from people whose title suggests that it's their job to provide feedback. Let me just put it that way. I think that's the best way I can put it. So there was no feedback to speak of until 6 months after all the art was complete. 6 months. Yeah. The next issue is that this horrible communication that I mentioned earlier turned into a monstrous problem with the person I was closely working with, because we had a massive disagreement on the stupidest thing that you probably won't even believe this when I say it, but the difference in opinion and the gigantic monstrous problem that it turned into was about the speech bubbles of the comic, okay? So let me just leave it at that. And it turned into this dead-end issue that actually completely messed up the relationship that, the friendship, whatever you might want to call it, that I had with the writer. And that left me working alone on this project for, like, I think about a year. Or so. I was working on this in a vacuum with, like I mentioned earlier, no feedback from anybody, and also at this point, no feedback from the writer either. So it was a strange time, you guys. It was very strange, and I had to desperately come up with ways of coping with crazy, like, mental health issues that started, well, they didn't just start cropping up there, they started getting, like, really out of control around that time. And because I guess I'll just segue into the fact that most of the anguish on anything, like, all the anguish came from having horrible pay, aside from all this other crap that I mentioned just now. So on top of all these other issues, which I feel like would have been fine, like, some of these things just happen, and I totally understand that you can never have, like, a perfect happy time working with other people, and usually there's, like, a little bit of friction, there's things you have to work on, there's things you have to discuss, and all of that is made bearable by sufficient pay. Usually that's how it works when you have a job and you just have to get things done, and you can be practical about it, because at the end of the day, you're taking back home a paycheck that will cover your living expenses and hopefully a little bit more to provide you with a decent living. You know, it makes for a reasonable life where you don't have to worry about too many things. Yeah. Well, in this case, there was none of that. In fact, what this comic paid was so abysmal that I constantly had to stress out and struggle to make money on the side just to cover my living expenses. So I was living for like two years, like 3 years, in a way that I was so broke that I couldn't afford pretty much anything. Like, all I could afford barely was my living expenses and the food, and that's pretty much it. Like, I hardly bought anything at all, and like the only big purchase that I made, I think right around when I started working on this project, was this freaking Cintiq that I still use to this day. I do like it a lot, and obviously I've got a lot of use out of it since then, but at the time it cost me like $3,000, and that $3,000 was burning a deep hole in my pocket for like the next 3.5 years. It was bad. So that was like the biggest purchase I made, and after that it was all just like clutching. Oh my god. Anyways, so yeah, and then even after, see, the crazy thing about this project is that you'd think that, like, okay, you're in a shitty situation and you just have to get it done, you know, you just gotta get it done, and then it'll all be over and the pain will stop, you know, just, you have to get it done. So that's what I was kind of thinking for a while. But the insane thing is that this is like the project of craft that just never stops, you know, like, even years after it was done, it still managed to bring disappointing news. It's almost comical how much of a train wreck this freaking project ended up being. Oh god. So What I'm talking about right now is basically how after I finished all the artwork and I thought that I was in the clear, every single piece of communication that happened sporadically, months in between, with the communicator, sorry, with the publisher or the whoever the person that was sending me messages about things like, okay, like here is the reviewed art plus whatever script with the notes and like from the editor, and I'm just like thinking to myself, what editor, like where was this editor when I was actually working on this project? Where was this editor when I submitted the 50% of this 200-page comic book? Like, where was the editing? Anyways, so I got these notes 6 months after I was done, which, you know what? It was my first time working with a publisher, so maybe some of you know this business and maybe you guys are familiar and maybe that's just how it works with everything. I wouldn't be surprised at all because, man, when people say that the publishing industry is slow, that is not a joke. It took like several months. Well, maybe not several. I'm gonna say like almost half a year for the contract to get written out. Like, that's how freaking slow this was. It was crazy. Once we were technically like on board and we were waiting for the contract, it took months for them to drop the contract, which is absolutely bonkers because I have never ever waited for longer than like a week for a contract for any other project. So there's that. And with the payment, I'm starting to suspect that maybe people lie just to make you feel better. Like, I kept seeing the word, oh, we're expediting. This has been expedited. We put in a word so that you don't have to wait for too long because we understand your situation and we've expedited the payment. And then this payment takes, I shit you not, like 3-4 months to come through. Like, that's what I mean. So it's the slowest thing of all time. And back to the issue that I was talking about with the 6 months late feedback. This feedback was insane. First of all, thankfully there wasn't a whole lot of feedback on the actual art, which made me sigh a big sigh of relief, but there was so much feedback on the script and the dialogue and like, which to me is like the level of absurdity. Like, I can't even describe how I was just like losing my mind. I was losing my mind cackling at how hilariously stupid and post hoc that was. It's like you have this finished script that was pitched years ago and was approved and was presumably edited, and then you wait for like 2.5 years for the art to be complete, and then it goes through the editing process when everything is done. Like, are you kidding me? They couldn't even change any of that shit. They couldn't change it because then it would affect the pacing and it would affect the art, so it would result in like a ton of redos for a ton of pages and it would just mess up the entirety of the graphic novel. So to even have it edited, quote unquote, at all at that point, to me was absolutely nuts. Like, what is the point of that? Anyways, another thing, so what happened after that, so this part of this editing process, another hilarious gem is that they didn't like the ending. So they wanted to change the ending, which is like, again, are you kidding me? Like, 3 years after, you want to change the ending? Anyways, okay, I gotta calm down. Yeah, so basically, like I said, they couldn't really do much because I was done. At this point, I was like 6 months off this project, guys. Like, I was working on other things. I was trying to, like, establish my freelance career. Like, the last thing I wanted to do is work on this crap, especially since I was I fulfilled my contractual obligations, and that was it. And plus, the abysmal pay that I got for it, I couldn't, like, I just couldn't care any less at that point. Obviously, I really wanted it to come out, but it was kind of like reeling from like an abusive relationship. You know what I mean? It's like you just don't want to hear about it. You don't want to have anything to do with it. That was kind of what I felt like at that time. But they wanted me to like draw an extra page at the end and to edit the previous page and just to like tweak a bunch of crap at the end. And I was like, yeah, I'm not gonna do that. Like, first of all, I'm not going to do it for free, like they tried to get me to do, which is a very common occurrence. I don't know if this is normal. I suppose it is, but they did not mention payment at any point for any of the extra crap that they tried to make me do. So I had to just tell them that I'm not going to do it unless they pay me. At which point they're like, oh, yeah, okay. So there's that. And obviously, when I had to do this one extra page, like 2 extra pages or something at the end, I charged my updated hourly rate, which was so funny in comparison to what they paid me for the rest of the graphic novel or whatever. It was like I swear to God, it was like 10 times the rate per page. Like probably more than that actually. So, I mean, at least they actually did comply, which makes me wonder, but whatever. The point is, there was that, so that like that just goes back to like really poor organization, and like God knows who was over. It makes me wonder like who was overseeing this project, like who let it get to a point where it's almost done and then they just notice that they actually don't like the ending. And the thing that also bothered the crap out of me is that before I finished all the artwork, so like when I was working on the last couple of chapters, I noticed a technical plot hole. And I mean, I suppose this is debatable, like maybe it wasn't that big of a deal. I guess I haven't seen any like detailed reviews. I've seen a lot of reviews that just generally mention the fact that the story was a little lackluster, but I haven't seen anybody mention specifically about this one plot hole. So I suppose it's safe to assume that nobody really noticed it. So maybe it wasn't big enough of a deal for anybody to bother like looking into it. But I just remember bringing it up with the agent and the writer both. I told them that there's this technical plot hole. It was like a timing thing. It was an issue where a character, like, they do something that puts them in the wrong place at the wrong time, kind of behind the scenes. But I suppose it doesn't matter. I mean, there was like in the last chapter, it was just a bunch of things that like things had to happen at a very specific time, otherwise the events or like the plot points wouldn't transpire. So like characters had to like run into each other at very specific points and they had to be in that right place. So I can see how maybe it would have messed things up if one of the characters had to be moved or it had to be like explained. I don't know, whatever. I guess it's not like it really wasn't my job to provide any solutions to that, and I don't know if I even thought of any, but I figured I should probably point it out because I mean, I don't know, I thought it was kind of a big deal, like, and plus I did also think that the ending was kind of rushed, but I don't know, whatever, I wasn't gonna say anything about it anyways. But yeah, like this was completely ignored, by the way. The plot hole thing, there's like, oh, like clearly like no one cared, just nobody wanted to do anything about it, no one cared, which is fine, whatever. Like I said, it wasn't that big of a deal. I don't think it definitely wasn't like the biggest problem there, so I can see why it was just kind of ignored. But still, like there was this constant attitude of it always felt like nobody cares about this project except for myself and the writer. That's what it felt like through the entirety of it, because anytime anybody else who was supposed to be involved, anytime that we would like talk to them, it was super rare. They never really had anything to say other than, oh yeah, it's great, just keep going, you know, like that kind of thing, where like that's nice, but what about like anything actually helpful would have been great, but you know what, it's done now. And then lastly, the thing that, like, you know, like I said, it's just like the shit hurricane that just keeps on giving, you know, and dishing out. So it it basically kind of flopped, I think. I mean, I don't know. See, I'm gonna talk to you guys a little bit about how convoluted it is to try to keep up with or try to find out what is happening after this book was published and officially came out. So I'm talking about numbers specifically, and what I'm talking about right now is how difficult it is or how impossible it is to find out how your book is doing. So basically, anytime I try to contact the publisher to find out some numbers, like they did paste some numbers into the email, but there were no like where are the analytics? You know, like that's what I was wondering about, cuz like I would have liked to know how many copies are freaking selling, or like on what platforms, or whatever, like anything. But and the crazy thing is that like the numbers seemed pretty decent at first, but then I asked again like several months later, and the numbers were lower, and I'm like, man, how is that even possible that the numbers can be lower now than they were before, especially considering the fact that I was told that the hardcover sold out and had to be reprinted at least once. So, like, there was all this stuff that makes no sense. And then this book also got picked up and translated by two other countries. So, like, two other publishers picked it up, and it came out in Russia, which, again, like, this was one of those things where it's just like the thing that peeks out of the corner of your life once in a while and goes like, hey, I still exist and I still have the capacity to make you miserable, which one of those moments was finding out that they printed the Russian version with my name spelled wrong, which was just insane because for several reasons. First of all, I am actually Russian. Like, I'm from Russia. I was born in Russia. I have a Russian name, for the love of God. Like, and they spelled it wrong. And also, this didn't even happen like quietly behind the scenes. They sent me an email months prior to the publication asking me to take a look and see if everything's cool. I immediately noticed that they spelled my name wrong, and I asked them to change it. And they said, yeah, of course, we'll change it. I obviously provided them with the correct spelling in Russian because I can actually read in Russian, and that was the reason why I was able to tell that it's spelled wrong. And I I followed up with another email like a week later just to make sure that they got it. And then they still spelled it wrong in the final book when it came out. And it was just like come on, man. Like, do your freaking job. Like, at what level? Like, it's hard to comprehend this level of incompetence, you guys, okay? Like, I don't know if it's incompetence or if just like legitimately no one cares. Like, that's what it just ends up feeling like. It's like, yeah, they could have done something about it, but maybe they just didn't give a shit. Or maybe the point at which they sent me the shit for review, it was already too late anyway, so maybe they thought like, oh, well, I guess we'll just send it just, to put a check mark on it, but actually it's too late to make any changes. Maybe it was that kind of situation, but it's like, who knows, man? And like, with something like that, you can't, like, that's it. Like, it's spelled wrong, and that's it. And it's especially kind of sad to me because that's the only other country that I would care about the spelling for, because that's the country where most of my relatives still live. You know what I mean? Like, it would be nice to, like, tell them that this book came out that I illustrated, like, only to see that, like, that's not even my name. What the fuck? Anyways, whatever. I don't know if I was, like, too upset about that, like, for no reason, but, man, like I said, it's comical. It never ends. You know what I mean? Yeah, so I don't know what's going on with I think the French publication is actually happening pretty soon. What I heard about it, I mean, I've only exchanged like a couple of emails with the French publisher over the last like 2 years or something, so I don't really know what's going on. I think it's supposed to come out in February at some point, and I'm gonna dig through my email, and I think I do have like the pre-order link for Amazon. But yeah, one thing I like is that apparently the French edition is supposed to be a little bit bigger. So that's great because the format was woefully too small, you know? Like, that's the one thing that really kind of bothers me about the book. Aside from that, I think it did turn out pretty nice. But yeah, so the French edition is coming out soon, and you know what? Hopefully, they will spell my name right this time. Just kidding. There's no spell change there because it's in English, but whatever. So yeah, and I mean, where do I go from here? Like, I guess at this point, I have barely even scraped the surface of all the things that went wrong in this stupid project, but it is over, and I did learn a lot from it, guys. I learned a lot, but I don't want to talk about what I learned here because it's all like very straightforward crap. Like, value yourself and like fucking have self-worth and work hard, but like, or work smart, not hard. Believe in yourself, etc. Communicate with the people you're working on, you know what I mean, or working with. Which is like, I don't know. I just really don't feel like talking about it. Sometimes I'm just not in the mood to give like a positive and productive art related talk, if you know what I mean. Because I'm human, and I do think it's unnatural to expect people to always teach you something new and interesting every single time they speak. So there's that. But yeah, I mean, I do feel a little bit better. I feel like I got it off my chest. And yeah, I mean, to I guess end this on a neutral note is that I did obviously think about it a lot over the years, and I think, listen, there's some things that couldn't have been avoided. I feel like what happened on this project was honestly a perfect reflection of what was going on in other parts of my life as well. So I think that I was just in a really bad place, and the amount of crap that I was attracting into my life because of the bad place that I was in mentally just started compounding at every level of my life, including work. So that was going on. And you know what? That's totally out there. Like, that's somewhere else. That doesn't have anything to do with this project. And the project is just, it is what it is. You know, it's something that I worked on, it's something that is done now, and I have moved on with my life marvelously, to say like the least. You know what I mean? It's been great. It's been totally smooth sailing after I was done. I did have some residual troubles to deal with, so the way that my life kind of ended up going was that this project was done, and well, I mean, I was finished with the active part of this project. Like, I finished all the actual work for it, like the cover, all the art, and all that other crap. And after that, I was just waiting for like little things from the publisher. And while this was going on, the rest of my life really just finally unraveled in a crazy way. And so I was pretty much busy dealing with that anyways. And during this time, my career work type of stuff really took a hit. So I wasn't really very active around that time, and I could barely even pick up a pencil. It was a really bad time. But you know what? After I purged all this other crap, and like the project was done and Grimoire was just finished, and I didn't have to deal with any of it again. And then after that, my life just started, you know, really sorting itself out. So there's that. There was always something good that happens after something so bad, but you know, like, yeah, I don't know. I wanted to tell you guys about it. Like, I wanted to tell you that it was just a shitty project, and that's about it, you know? And like, I am glad I finished it. Sometimes I look through it and I can't even believe that I did. And I don't even know how I managed to sometimes, but yeah, like at some point it got so bad that I had to Google self-help books on how to cope with anxiety and how to get up in the morning. And like, it's gonna sound sad, but man, that was my life. Like, my life was reading these freaking self-help books every morning, desperately taking notes and chanting one day at a time. Like, my mantra every single day became one day at a time, one day at a time, one day at a time. Because the moment that I was thinking about like the future or like the amount of work that I still have to do, or where my life is headed, or like what's happening in the grand scheme of things, man, like, ooh, my mind unraveled so fast. So, you know what? One day at a time, good mantra. It worked. It worked. I got it from this self-help book. I think it's called How to Stop Worrying and Start Living, because I was like, I developed so much anxiety that like it was paralyzing. Anyways, so I mean, at the end of the day, I made it through, and that's that. But that was the basic gist of why I was so mad about this project and why I like just get so weird and obnoxiously dramatic every time it comes up, and like I do these dramatic sighs and I laugh to myself like a maniac without explaining anything. So yeah, I essentially like glossed over everything that happened in this video. And I don't even know if I want to go into any more detail than that. Like, it's just done, you know, like best I can best I can advise is just no, you know what? I don't have anything to say. I don't. I'm sorry. That's pretty much it. So yeah, maybe I'm gonna sit down and make some sort of what I actually learned from this project and what the takeaways were and blah blah blah, like, or whatever in the next video, because you know there are things, and maybe I've even talked about some of them before, but yeah, you guys just got the quick and dirty rundown that took me 30 minutes. But you know what? All things considered, that was pretty fast, and I am a little bit proud of myself for being able to condense it into only 30 minutes. I was personally expecting something like an hour, so this is fine. And yeah, I will see you guys in my next one. Bye!